There's something special about storytelling. You don't need to be a writer. You don't need perfect grammar. You just need a memory and a feeling. Everyone has stories. But when you're learning English, telling even a simple story can feel hard. You wonder, where do I begin? What if I forget the words? What if it sounds boring? But here's the truth, people don't remember your grammar. They remember how you made them feel. They remember the smile in your voice, the little moment you shared. And that's what this episode is all about, how to speak about your past in English, without fear and with heart. Let's start with something very simple. Every story begins with a feeling, a moment that stayed with you. It could be funny, sad, embarrassing, or just small and beautiful. The kind of moment that makes you say, "I'll never forget that day." So to start a story, you can use phrases like, "This one time, I remember when, I'll never forget the day, there was this moment, one time, something really funny happened." Let's try them slowly. This one time. I remember when. I'll never forget the day. There was this moment. One time, something really funny happened. Even just those phrases can open a door. Now imagine you want to tell a short story about a childhood memory. You don't need to explain everything. Just the feeling. Just the key moment. Maybe you say, "I remember when I was 6, I got lost in a grocery store. I started crying, and a kind woman helped me find my mom. I still remember how warm her voice was." That's it. That's a story. It has a beginning, something that happened, and a feeling at the end. So let's practice that rhythm. Something happened, then what, and how did it feel? Here's another example. One time, my friend and I decided to cook dinner together. But we forgot to turn on the stove. We waited an hour for the pasta to cook, nothing happened. We laughed so hard when we realized. It became one of our favorite memories. You see? You don't need fancy words. Just simple steps. Now let's try to build your story step by step. Start with where you were. Try saying, "I was at school. I was at the train station. I was visiting my grandparents. I was walking home from work. I was at a cafe with some friends." Now, what happened next? Try saying, "Suddenly, I noticed, then something funny happened. I saw someone I didn't expect. I heard a strange sound. Someone came up to me and said, 'Let's repeat a few together.' I was at the train station. Suddenly, I noticed. I was walking home from work. Then something funny happened. I was at school. Someone came up to me and said." These are your story building blocks. And remember, you don't need to speak fast. In fact, slower is better. When you speak slowly, your listener stays with you. Your memory has space to breathe. Your words land softly. That's where fluency lives, not in speed, but in comfort. Now let's talk about how to add emotion to your story. This is what makes your listener connect. Try phrases like, "I felt so embarrassed. I couldn't stop laughing. I felt nervous, but also excited. I didn't know what to do. It was the best feeling ever." Let's say them now. I felt so embarrassed. I couldn't stop laughing. I felt nervous, but also excited. I didn't know what to do. It was the best feeling ever. When you add how you felt, even a small moment becomes big. Now think of a story that starts in a normal day, but something unexpected happens. For example, I was going to the grocery store, just like every Friday. But that day, I forgot my wallet at home. When I reached the checkout, I had no way to pay. I felt so awkward. But then, a stranger behind me paid for my milk. It was such a kind gesture. I never forgot that. Look at that. Simple words. Honest emotion. A clear picture. Let's now try adding details to your story, not too many, just enough to make it feel real. You can mention the time of day, the weather, what you were wearing, or the mood around you. These help paint a picture. Try saying, "It was raining that day. The sun was just setting. I was wearing my favorite blue sweater. It was a quiet afternoon. There were people everywhere." Let's repeat a few. It was raining that day. The sun was just setting. It was a quiet afternoon. There were people everywhere. These are soft touches. They give your listener something to imagine. Now let's talk about ending your story. A good story doesn't need a big ending. It just needs a feeling. Something your listener can take with them. You can end with, "So yeah, that happened. And to this day, I still remember it. It taught me something simple, but important. I still smile when I think about it. It was just a small thing, but it stayed with me." Let's say them slowly. So yeah, that happened. And to this day, I still remember it. It taught me something simple, but important. I still smile when I think about it. It was just a small thing, but it stayed with me. That's how we bring stories to life. Not by being dramatic, but by being human. Let's take a breath. Now I want you to think about a simple memory. Nothing big. Just a moment. Maybe something funny that happened with a friend. Maybe a little accident in the kitchen. Maybe a quiet moment that made you feel something. And I want you to try, just in your mind, to tell that story. Use simple steps. Where were you? What happened? How did you feel? What did you learn? Even if it's just in your head, you're building fluency. Because this is the kind of English that lives in your heart. The kind that connects. That comforts. That brings you closer to the people you talk to. In the next part, we'll explore how to tell funny stories, awkward stories, and stories that make people feel close to you. But for now, just remember this: you are already a storyteller. You've lived moments. You've felt emotions. You've smiled, cried, laughed, and remembered. Now you're just learning how to share them in English. And every time you try, every time you speak, your story becomes a gift. Let's keep practicing. Some of the best stories we tell are the ones that make people laugh, or cringe, or say, "That happened to you?" And funny or awkward stories are often the most natural to tell because they feel human. We all make mistakes. We all say silly things. We all have that one moment we think about in the shower and laugh or blush. But in English, learners often get stuck. They don't know how to describe the moment. They worry about vocabulary. They feel afraid the joke won't land. So they stay quiet, even when their mind is full of memories. But the truth is, funny stories don't need perfect delivery. They need honesty, a little rhythm, and just enough emotion to carry the listener along. Let's begin with how to start a light, funny story. Try saying, "One of the most embarrassing things that ever happened to me was, this is kind of silly, but there was this one time I totally messed up. I still can't believe I did this. I laugh every time I remember this." These phrases tell your listener, relax. This story is funny. Maybe a little awkward, but not serious. That tone helps you speak freely. Now imagine a story like this. I was at the airport, waiting to board my flight. I saw a man from far away and thought it was my uncle. I ran up to him and hugged him from behind, only to realize it was a complete stranger. I was so embarrassed. I apologized 100 times and hid in the bathroom for 10 minutes. It's a small story, but it's memorable. It has a build-up, a mistake, a reaction, and a feeling. Let's break that rhythm down. You set the scene. You explain what you did. Then, the surprise or twist. And finally, how you felt. That's the recipe. Let's try another one. I was giving a presentation in class, and I wanted to say, "Focus on the facts." But I accidentally said, "Focus on the fats." Everyone started laughing, and I didn't understand why until my teacher explained. I laughed too, and from then on, my friends called me Fats Guy. Now let's try a softer, awkward story. Not embarrassing. Just funny and weird. I was in a coffee shop, writing on my laptop. A man walked by, looked at me, and said, "You remind me of my daughter." I smiled and said, "Thank you." Then he added, "She's 3 years old." I didn't know what to say after that. You see? These moments don't need to be perfect. They just need to be real. Now, how do we build funny moments with small expressions? You can use phrases like, "I had no idea what to do." "I froze." "I just stood there, like a statue." "I wanted the ground to swallow me." "I couldn't stop laughing after that." Let's try them slowly. I had no idea what to do. I froze. I just stood there, like a statue. I wanted the ground to swallow me. I couldn't stop laughing after that. These are emotional responses that add color to your storytelling. Another great trick: using exaggeration, just a little. Not to lie, but to make things fun. For example, I was so embarrassed, I wanted to disappear. I waited for what felt like 10 years. I must have apologized 20 times in 1 minute. My face turned as red as a tomato. I still have nightmares about it. These phrases make your English more playful. They show personality. Now imagine you're telling a story about a funny misunderstanding. These are great for English learners because they often happen when learning the language. Try saying, "When I first moved to this city, I thought the word bill meant money you get, not money you owe. So when someone said, "Here's your bill," I said, "Thank you," and walked away. The waiter had to chase me down. Or, I once asked for a flat white at a cafe, but said fat white by mistake. The barista just stared at me. I didn't understand until my friend whispered, "Wrong word." I wanted to disappear. Language mix-ups make perfect stories. They're funny, relatable, and they show your growth. Now let's learn how to express those small moments of realization in storytelling. You can use, "That's when I realized," and suddenly, "It hit me, then it made sense. I finally understood, I connected the dots." Try them now. "That's when I realized." And suddenly, "It hit me. Then it made sense. I finally understood. I connected the dots." These phrases help turn your story from "just this happened" into "this meant something." Let's now explore how to deliver the funny or awkward moment with a sense of timing. In English, this often means pausing before the punchline or funny twist. For example, I told everyone I was an introvert, but I actually meant to say intern. I was so proud of myself. I kept saying, "Yes, I'm an introvert at this company." My boss was confused for weeks. You pause right before the joke. You speak a little slower. You let the listener catch the humor. And don't forget the most powerful storytelling tool, your voice. Change your tone slightly for different parts of the story. When you're confused, speak softly. When you remember something shocking, pause. When you say the twist, smile. Even in audio, people feel your expression. Now, how do we end funny stories? Try, and yeah, that's how I learned never to wear white pants on a rainy day. So now, every time I go there, I double-check my shoes. Honestly, I still laugh about it. I tell this story at every party. It was awkward, but it made my day. These endings give a soft landing. They close the loop. Let's take a moment to reflect. You don't need to be a comedian. You don't need big stories. You just need honesty, a little rhythm, and the courage to share your mess. In the next part, we'll talk about how to tell meaningful or emotional stories in English. Stories with heart, with reflection. The kind you share when someone asks, "What's something you'll never forget?" But for now, remember this: if people laugh with you, they connect with you. If you can laugh at yourself, you're fluent in life. And when your English holds humor, softness, and honesty all together, it becomes something beautiful. Let's keep going. Some stories stay with us. Not because they were funny. Not because they were dramatic. But because they felt real. A quiet moment. A deep conversation. A memory that shaped who we are. And when it comes to English, these are the stories many learners are afraid to tell. Not because they don't remember, but because it feels hard to express such delicate feelings in another language. The emotions are there. The thoughts are there. But the words feel out of reach. So today, we'll practice how to tell personal, emotional stories in English. Stories that reflect your heart, not just your vocabulary. Let's begin with something gentle. You can start a meaningful story with phrases like, "There's something I've never really talked about," But I remember this moment that changed me. This story always stays with me. There was a time in my life when things felt different. I don't tell this story often, but I think about it a lot. These phrases signal to the listener, this is honest. This is close to me. Please listen gently. Now let's imagine a story. Something like, I was 17, and I had just failed a big exam. I was sitting in the park alone, crying quietly. An old man walked past me and sat on the bench nearby. He didn't ask me what was wrong. He just said, the sun will rise tomorrow, no matter what you scored today. Then he walked away. I never saw him again. But I've carried those words with me for years. It's a small story, but it holds a deep feeling. It teaches something without trying too hard. And that's the beauty of emotional stories, they don't shout. They whisper. Let's practice a few phrases to express emotional turning points. You can say, that was the moment I realized, I didn't know it then, but that day changed everything. I never saw things the same way again. It taught me something I didn't know I needed. I think that's when I started to grow. Try them softly, with feeling. That was the moment I realized. I didn't know it then, but that day changed everything. I never saw things the same way again. It taught me something I didn't know I needed. I think that's when I started to grow. Now let's say you want to talk about a memory that makes you feel both happy and sad. Try starting with, it's a memory that makes me smile and tear up at the same time. It was one of the best and hardest days of my life. I felt something I didn't know how to name. It was beautiful, and it hurt a little too. That day is still so clear in my heart. These are the kinds of stories that connect people, because they're true. And when someone listens to your voice, and hears your heart inside the English, they won't care about grammar. They'll care about you. Let's imagine another story together. My grandmother used to make tea every evening. We would sit on the porch, just the two of us, watching the sky change colors. She always said, silence is also a kind of conversation. I didn't understand what she meant at the time. But now, when I sit quietly with someone I love, I remember her words. And I finally get it. That's a story about presence, about love, and time. Now let's explore how to talk about something you learned from a painful or emotional experience. You can say, it wasn't easy, but it taught me strength. That experience shaped who I am today. I still carry that lesson with me. Sometimes pain becomes a teacher. I wouldn't want to go through it again, but I'm grateful I did. Say them slowly. It wasn't easy, but it taught me strength. That experience shaped who I am today. I still carry that lesson with me. Sometimes pain becomes a teacher. I wouldn't want to go through it again, but I'm grateful I did. These are ways to show maturity in your storytelling. Let's now talk about how to describe the feeling in the moment. You can use soft emotional vocabulary like, I felt lost. I felt small but safe. I felt seen. I felt completely alone, but also completely alive. I felt like something had shifted inside me. These are not dramatic. They're quiet truths. Now imagine a moment that made you cry, but not because you were sad. Maybe because something beautiful happened. Someone showed kindness. Someone surprised you. Try starting with, "It was such a small thing, but it moved me deeply. I didn't expect to feel anything, but I did. It reminded me that people can be good. I didn't say anything, but inside I felt everything. It wasn't the words, it was the way they looked at me." You see, when you speak from your heart, even in simple English, it reaches people. It builds connection. That's the real power of language. Now let's say you want to tell a story that's a little heavy. You can prepare the listener by saying, "This story is a little emotional for me. I'm sharing this because it matters. It's not easy to talk about, but I think it's important. This memory still brings tears to my eyes sometimes. I hope you'll listen with kindness." These phrases help you feel safe. They let your listener meet you where you are. Let's end this part with a soft reminder: your stories are sacred. They don't need to be big. They don't need to be polished. They just need to be yours. And when you speak them, even with broken English, they come alive. Because the language of the heart is always understood. In the final part of this episode, we'll bring everything together. We'll practice how to tell a complete story from beginning to end with clarity, emotion, and natural rhythm. But for now, let this stay with you. You are not just learning English. You're learning how to express your life. And every time you tell your story, you make the world feel just a little more connected. Let's keep going. You've practiced how to begin a story, how to build the rhythm, how to express humor, awkwardness, emotion, and learning. Now, we bring it all together into something complete. Because telling a full story in English doesn't mean saying a lot. It means choosing what matters and letting your words carry the moment. Let's walk through it step by step. Every story has a soft start. It begins with a setting, a feeling, a reason to tell it. You might say, "I want to tell you about a moment I still think about sometimes." Or, "This story is small, but it taught me a lot." Or even just, "Let me tell you something that once happened to me." You've just opened a door. Now the listener is walking in. Next, you take them to the beginning. You tell them where you were, when it happened, and what was going on. Not too much, just enough. For example, it was a quiet Sunday afternoon. I was sitting at a cafe, drinking tea, and watching the rain. I had just had a long, emotional week, and I wanted to be alone for a while. Already, your listener is with you. Then, something changes. Something happens. A woman walked in. She was maybe in her 60s. She was wearing a red scarf and carrying a book I had just finished reading last week. I looked at her, and without thinking, I smiled. She looked back, smiled too, and sat at the table next to mine. Now, the story begins to move. It doesn't need to be fast. It just needs to feel alive. She opened the book, looked up at me, and asked, "Did you like the ending?" I laughed. We started talking. About the book. About life. About rainy days and quiet thoughts. It was one of the gentlest conversations I've ever had with a complete stranger. You describe what was said, what was felt, and what made it stay with you. Before she left, she said, You remind me of someone I loved very much. And then she walked out into the rain. I never saw her again. Now the story is nearing its end. But we don't close it with drama, we close it with meaning. Some moments are short, but they feel endless. That day didn't fix anything in my life. But it softened something inside me. And I still think about it when I feel alone. That's it. That's a full story. Let's look at the simple parts that made it work. You started with a moment. You gave it a soft beginning. You added a small event. You described how you felt. And you closed it with meaning. This is the structure of a natural English story. And now it's your turn. Think of something real. Something small. It could be a memory from childhood. A kind act from a stranger. A funny mistake you made. Or a quiet afternoon that made you feel something. Start with just one sentence. Like, this story makes me feel something every time I remember it. Then add the setting. Where were you? What time was it? What did it look like? Then add what happened. Who was there? What changed? Then add how you felt. Confused? Happy? Sad? Surprised? Then close it softly. What did you learn? What stayed with you? You don't need to rush. Speak slowly. Speak simply. Speak honestly. And let the story be enough, just as it is. Now let's practice that rhythm one more time through another example. This time, about learning something the hard way. I was in my first job. I wanted to do everything perfectly. One day, I made a mistake in a report and sent it to my boss without double-checking. She wasn't angry. But she pointed it out, and I felt so embarrassed. I spent the whole night thinking about that one line of numbers. The next morning, she came to my desk, handed me a tea, and said, "You're allowed to mess up." That's how you learn. That moment taught me that mistakes aren't the end, they're the beginning. That's a story too. It has a feeling. A mistake. A moment of human connection. A lesson. And now it lives in someone else's mind, just because you told it. Let's now reflect on what stories really are. Stories are not performances. They're not exams. They're not long speeches with perfect words. They are gifts. Moments. Ways of saying, "This happened to me." And maybe it will mean something to you too. In English, you don't need to speak like a native to be a storyteller. You just need presence. A slow voice. And a heart that's willing to share. You've now learned how to start a story with calm confidence, describe events with simple, clear steps, add emotion, without pressure, use natural expressions and soft reflections, end a story with gentle meaning. That's more than fluency. That's connection. Let's say a few final thoughts together. Repeat them with me. My stories matter. I don't need big words to speak honestly. Every story I tell in English helps me grow. I'm allowed to speak slowly, softly, and with care. My voice in English is becoming mine. And it is. With every episode. With every practice. With every sentence you dare to say, even when it's not perfect. Because storytelling is not about being impressive. It's about being human. And that's what makes your English powerful.